Imagine waking up to the hollow clang of a distant church bell, muffled by the thick morning fog that seeps through the cracks of your wooden shutters. It's not your alarm clock. You don't have one. You're freezing. You slept in all your clothes, huddled under a moth-eaten woolen blanket atop a straw mattress that reeks faintly of mildew, animal dander, and the lingering scent of every sweaty, fevered body that's lain there before you. Your breath comes out in visible puffs, though the calendar insists it's spring. You itch, everywhere. Lice, fleas, and the occasional bedbug make your sleep a battlefield. And your stomach? It's crying out like a beast, loud, empty, and unanswered. Welcome to your first morning in the 14th century. You wouldn't last a day. We love to romanticize the Middle Ages. Noble knights, flowing banners, castle feasts under torchlight. Popular fiction drowns it all in glittering fantasy, portraying a world of chivalry and gallantry. But peel back the silk veil and you're left with a world that's unforgiving, punishing, and often incomprehensibly brutal. If you've ever grumbled about your morning commute or cursed your phone battery, congratulations, you're soft. You wouldn't survive even the first daylight hour in this world. You shuffle to your feet, your joints already aching from a damp, uneven sleep. Time for breakfast, if there is one. Maybe a heel of stale, rock-hard bread you have to soak in warm beer to chew. Yes, beer. Because the water will poison you. Streams are cesspools. Rivers carry human waste, rotting corpses, and the runoff from every privy uphill. Wells aren't filtered, and filtration hasn't been invented. Diseases with poetic names, dysentery, typhoid, cholera, will spill your insides like a busted wineskin. So you drink weak ale. Every morning. Even children. Coffee? No.
Tea.
What's that? Fruit is rare and regarded with suspicion. Milk sours within hours. And vegetables are either boiled to gray sludge or eaten raw and regretted later. And unless you were born under the right banner, you're a peasant. Which means your daily routine reads like punishment. No, I'll do it later. No long weekends. You start by mucking out the pig pen, then move on to milking a goat, feeding chickens, hauling water from a muddy stream, chopping wood with a blade that's seen better centuries. You weed, plow, and reap fields owned by someone else. You thatch your leaking roof, repair your torn shoes, and patch your threadbare tunic. All before noon. No electricity, no appliances, no plumbing. If it rains, you're soaked. If it snows, you're frozen. If you're injured, you limp. If you're ill, you work until you're dead. What about smell? Oh, you're imagining it, aren't you? Now double it. Then double it again. Hygiene, if you can even call it that, is a mystery wrapped in mud. You bathe only when it's warm enough to risk a cold soak, and only when the river isn't frozen or fouled. A toilet is a wooden bench with a hole that empties into a pit, or worse, a shared trench behind your hovel. Toilet paper doesn't exist. Moss, straw, or your own tunic is as good as it gets. The air is thick with the stench of sweat, urine, excrement, animals, smoke, and rot. Your clothes never truly dry. Your skin cracks in the cold. Your hair is greasy. You dream of lavender but smell like a compost heap. And you accept it, because everyone else smells just as bad. You labor from dawn to dusk, measuring time not by hours but by shadows. The sun rises, you work. The sun sets, you pray for strength to survive the next cycle. Tools are primitive. Iron if you're lucky. Mostly wood and rust. Your shoes are little more than stiffened cloth or leather scraps. Every blister is a gamble. Every cut could be your last. Infections swell, fester, and kill without ceremony. There is no penicillin.
No antiseptic.
No concept of germs. You get sick, you wait, and either your body wins or the fever does. If your body fails you, there's help, sort of. The local healer may be a woman who burns sage and recites scripture while rubbing your feet with goose fat. Or a barber surgeon who believes in balancing your humors by draining a pint of your blood into a rusty bowl. Headache? Trepanning? Fever? Leeches? Infected leg? Amputation with a dull blade and no anesthetic. You scream? Possession. Yudi? God's will. You live? A miracle. A lucky fluke. And then it's back to the fields. And did I mention the rats? Oh yes, the rats. Brazen, bold, and omnipresent. In your bed, in your pantry, crawling across your body in the middle of the night. They bring with them a tiny, unwelcome passenger, the flea. And with the flea, the Black Death. In just a few years, nearly half of Europe's population was gone. Entire families, entire towns vanished. The world drowned in a tide of pustules, fever, and fear. People blamed everything: miasma, witches, Jews, the wrath of God. They killed cats, thinking them agents of evil, which, of course, made the rat problem even worse. A genius solution, really. Maybe you think you'd fare better as a noble. Fine, let's put you in a castle. Not quite the dream you expected. You're now in a massive, echoing stone fortress that's colder than any peasant's hut. Fireplaces don't heat castles. They smoke up the room and leave soot on the walls. Your windows are glassless slits. Tapestries cover the damp. Your servants? A mix of gossiping spies and disgruntled peasants. Your meals are frequent, yes, but bland and greasy. Spices are worth more than gold. Bread is white, but tasteless. Wine is sour. And enemies are everywhere. Outside your walls, inside your court. Poison, daggers, betrayal. Welcome to the top. You bathe perhaps once a month, when servants haul buckets of boiling water up a spiral staircase. You share this tepid bath with family, guests, and occasionally the dog. By the time you slide in, the water is brown. Still, you're lucky. Most people never bathe at all. Childbirth? A blood-soaked gamble. Even among nobles. Midwives learned through folklore, not science. Fever after delivery was almost expected. Babies died so frequently, mothers didn't name them until they survived their first year. Cemeteries filled with infants. Grief was constant, but quiet. Public mourning was a luxury of time. Entertainment? Let's be generous. You might hear a traveling minstrel sing the same tale everyone's heard since their grandfather's day. Maybe you see a puppet show. Once a year, a fair might roll into town with music, dancing, and roasted meat. But more often, you sit in silence, listening to the crackling fire and your own growling belly. Reading? You can't. Almost no one can. Books are written by hand and cost more than your house. Stories are memorized, not read. Religion offers structure, but not comfort. The church dictates your every move. You pay tithes, follow holy days, and endure weekly sermons in Latin you can't understand. Question anything and you're labeled a heretic. Heretics are burned. The Inquisition ensures no one thinks outside the box. Or rather, no one thinks. Period. Sin is everywhere. Redemption is impossible. And suffering is proof of holiness.
Va?
Glorious in books, hellish in reality. You're conscripted, handed a pike, and sent to march alongside other terrified men toward a field that will soon be littered with corpses. Armor is for nobles. You have linen. Your sword is a rusted heirloom. Your chances? Slim. You die in mud, clutching your guts, surrounded by screaming strangers. If you're lucky enough to survive, you return home with nothing but wounds and nightmares. Still want to be a knight? Start training at 7. Learn horsemanship, swordplay, falconry, Latin, prayer, and etiquette. Every day is discipline, pain, bruises, and fear. Real battles aren't duels, they're chaos. Your armor weighs as much as a child. Your horse slips in the muck. You can't see through your helmet. You can't breathe. Glory is fleeting. Wounds are forever. You might win a skirmish only to die from infected shrapnel days later. As a woman, your world shrinks further. You are property. A daughter until you're a wife. A wife until you're a widow. You don't inherit, you don't vote, you don't speak in public. Your role is birthing children, managing a home, and keeping silent. Love? Optional. Consent? Irrelevant. Speak out and you're a witch. A midwife with too much knowledge. A widow with too much land. A girl with too much spirit. All threats. And threats are dealt with at the stake. Monastic life? If you think joining a monastery means peace and introspection, think again. You rise at 2 a.m. for prayer. You chant in the cold, copy manuscripts until your fingers cramp, and eat thin broth in silence. You never own anything. You never speak your mind. You kneel. You fast. You flagellate. You confess thoughts you haven't even had. You live to serve and die quietly, hopefully without scandal. Even sleep isn't simple. Nights are divided. First sleep, then wakefulness, sometimes for prayer, sometimes for fear of wolves or thieves. Then second sleep. Beds are shared. Rooms are cold. Vermin scurry across the floorboards. Dreams are omens. Nightmares are warnings. You wake unrest. Every morning. For decades, still romanticizing it, the Middle Ages weren't just hard. They were grueling, relentless, and soul-breaking. Death was always around the corner. Pain was unending. And boredom was the daily backdrop. There was no escape, no progress, just endurance. This is only the beginning. Stay tuned for part 2, because truly you wouldn't last a day in medieval times. Part 2, welcome back to the 14th century. You survived the first day. Barely. But there's no time to celebrate. Morning has bled into afternoon, and the Middle Ages aren't slowing down to let you catch your breath. Hunger gnaws at you constantly. Not just a twinge, but a full-bodied ache that turns your limbs weak and your patience shorter. Lunch? That's a luxury. Maybe some pottage, a watery stew made of barley, weeds, and yesterday's leftovers, if you're lucky. Otherwise, chew that crust of bread slowly. It needs to last. And don't expect a clean bowl. It's a chunk of wood passed down through generations, stained with time and use, never properly scrubbed, only rinsed in cold, gray water. Now it's back to work. Always work. You think your modern job is soul-sucking? Try spending 10 hours breaking soil with a wooden hoe, your spine bent like a question mark, while your hands blister and crack. Or worse, try spinning wool with freezing fingers, eyes straining in the dim light of a single candle stub. You drop the spindle, you start again. Every moment of your life is consumed by survival.
No hobbies. No leisure. No dreams.
Just duty. Want to sing? There's no time. Want to paint? Who can afford paint? Your daily art is in knowing which weeds won't kill you if you boil them for dinner. And if you're in town, things aren't easier. Towns are cesspools, literally. Chamber pots are emptied into the street with a careless shout of, "Guard low." If you don't move fast enough, you're wearing it. The roads are ankle-deep in filth. Horses relieve themselves where they stand. Butchers dump offal into open drains. Rats run the show. Cats are half-starved. Dogs more dangerous than wolves. The stench? It clings to everything. Your clothes, your hair, your throat. You taste it when you breathe. There's no escape. Not even in church, where incense fights a losing battle against centuries of sweat, mildew, and rotting wood. Don't even think about getting injured in town. A broken bone might mean a lifetime of deformity. There's no rehab, no casting, just hope and prayer. A cobbler might tie splints with rope if you're lucky. And theft? Common. If you have something, someone wants it. Locks are rare. Doors are thin. You sleep with your meager belongings under your blanket, and still worry they'll vanish by morning. And what about fire? It's everywhere. Open flames, dry wood, no fire brigade. One spark and your entire street could be ash by sunrise. The justice system? A nightmare. Trial by combat, ordeal by fire, or the ever-fair system of whoever pays the judge more. Torture isn't reserved for the guilty. It's used to find guilt. Confession under duress is evidence. Your rights, a laughable concept. You have none. You exist at the mercy of your Lord, your church, and your neighbor's gossip. If someone accuses you of theft or witchcraft or heresy, you might be drowned to prove your innocence. If you float, you're guilty. If you sink, too bad. Seasonal changes don't bring relief, they bring new threats. Spring is mud and sickness. Summer is sweat, rot, and plague. Fall is backbreaking harvest. Winter is starvation. Every year is a cycle of barely surviving. And if the harvest fails? Famine, bread riots, cannibalism in the worst years. Yes, it happened. People ate bark, clay, even each other. In 1315, the Great Famine swept across Europe. People dug up graves. Parents abandoned children. It lasted for years. No food, No hope, only waiting to die slower than your neighbors. You begin to realize something chilling. There is no rest, no security, no future, just an endless present filled with toil, discomfort, and fear. Children grow up fast because many don't grow up at all. A scraped knee can kill. A cough can spread through a family like wildfire. Elders are rare. If you reach 40, you're ancient. Your teeth are gone. Your back is ruined. Your stories are grim. And they aren't stories of adventure. They're warnings, passed on by firelight, whispered prayers that tomorrow might not be worse. And yet, you keep going. Because what else can you do? Your world is small, bounded by your feet and your fears. Travel is dangerous. Maps are expensive. The next village over might as well be the moon. You've heard of Rome, maybe Jerusalem, but they're words in a sermon, not places you'll ever see. You don't know the world. You barely know the valley beyond your fields. At night, as you huddle under your damp blanket again, lice crawling near your ears, you realize no one is coming to save you. There is no upward mobility.
No miracle cure.
No social safety net. Just another cold, dark night followed by another brutal day. No comfort in routine, no promise in repetition. Just a rhythm of misery you've learned to endure. You might look up at the stars and wonder, what is out there? What lies beyond the mountains? But then your child coughs beside you, or your belly growls louder, or a wolf howls in the distance, and the sky means nothing again. This isn't a movie set. This isn't a Renaissance fair. This is the real Middle Ages. And you still wouldn't last a day. Ready for part 3? Part 3, Night falls in the Dark Ages. The sun sets like a dying ember, slow and sullen, behind the soot-stained hills. You think it's time for rest, but rest is a concept, not a reality. In the Middle Ages, sleep doesn't come easy. First of all, you don't sleep through the night. That's a modern fantasy. Here, sleep comes in 2 broken chunks, first sleep and second sleep. In between, hours of silence, discomfort, and dread. You might pray, you might weep, you might lie there, staring into the blackness as your joints throb and your thoughts spiral into superstition and fear. You're not alone, even if no one's in the room. The night is full of things, real and imagined. The wind is a whisper, and every creak is a curse. The forests surrounding the villages are thick and unknown. Wolves howl, owls cry, spirits, yes, real to you, drift just outside the thatch walls, waiting for an invitation or a careless mistake. There is no electricity, no light switch to chase them away. Just a flickering flame or nothing at all. And you lie on a sack of straw, sharing space with fleas and mice, maybe a pig if you're lucky. Beds are a luxury. Privacy is non-existent. You hear everything. Your father's breath, your sister's snore, the cough that sounds worse tonight than it did yesterday. That cough might mean death. It usually does. Dreams are no escape. Nightmares thrive in an age where they are seen as messages, warnings, or divine punishment. You might dream of fire and brimstone, and wake wondering if you've sinned in your sleep. You might confess it the next morning just to be safe. Midnight arrives and passes. You shiver, you scratch, you try to find a dry patch of blanket. Sleep, when it returns, is no comfort. It's just a temporary forgetting. When dawn breaks again, it isn't with birdsong or beauty. It's with the groan of joints and the call to labor. Again, always again. Your breakfast? Gruel, if you can find it. Cold, flavorless, and thin as dishwater. Meat is rare. Eggs are a gift. And coffee? Unheard of. Your energy comes from habit, not nutrition. From obligation, not fuel. You trudge out into the fields or the workshop or the market square, knowing it will be just like yesterday. Only colder, or wetter, or worse. Marriage isn't about love. It's about survival. Children aren't blessings, they're insurance. More hands to work the soil, more mouths to feed. And childbirth? Dangerous. For both mother and baby. The midwife does her best, but she's working with herbs and instinct, not science. If the child dies, you bury it quickly and pray. If the mother dies, you try not to join her in your grief, because there's work to do. Religion is constant. Not spiritual, it's structural. The church is your calendar, your courthouse, your newscast, your fear. You tithe to survive. You pray not to go to heaven, but to avoid hell. You obey not out of love, but because questioning means punishment. Maybe public flogging. Maybe worse, festivals offer brief reprieve, but even joy is rationed. Ale is weak. Bread is hard. Music is rare. A lute if someone can afford one. Drums, made from animal skin. Dances are wild, sweaty, and short-lived. Laughter exists, but it's survival laughter. You laugh so you don't scream, and above you all always looms the threat of plague. Not just the Black Death, though that will come. Always disease. Always illness. No soap. No antibiotics. No understanding of germs. A bad tooth can kill you. A sniffle can become your tomb. You smell the rot in others before you see it. You avoid your friends, your family. Because you have to. There are no doctors, only barbers, herbalists, and charlatans. They bleed you, burn you, bless you, and bury you. Medicine is guesswork. Mostly wrong. Still, you carry on. Because everyone does. Because they have no choice. Your pain is normal. Your loss is routine. You live with death like a roommate, a shadow you greet every morning. And if you're lucky, if you endure, you might live long enough to be a walking miracle. A grandparent at 45, with bowed legs, bad breath, a back bent from years of labor, and eyes that see less than they remember. Night will come again, and with it, the silence, the cold, the memories of everything that didn't kill you today. Ready for part 4? Part 4, The Invisible Enemies. By now, you're probably wondering how anyone made it out of the Middle Ages alive. The answer is they didn't, not in the way we think of living today. What they called survival, we might call barely hanging on. And their greatest enemies weren't sword-wielding invaders or mythical beasts. No, the true assassins of the age were invisible, creeping through the water, crawling on the skin, growing in the bread. Let's start with water. Clean water? Almost non-existent. Rivers and wells were shared with livestock, used for washing clothes, and contaminated with human waste. Boiling, it wasn't routine. Filtration didn't exist. A sip of the wrong stream could mean a week of agony or death. Dysentery, cholera, and typhoid swept through entire towns. You might blame it on bad air or sin or a curse. But the real villain, the very thing you need to live, next came the bread. You think a stale crust is bad? Try ergot-infested rye. A poisonous fungus that grows in damp conditions. Ergot causes convulsions, hallucinations, gangrene, and death. Entire villages suffered what seemed like possession or madness. People danced in the streets until their legs gave out. Others clawed at their skin until it peeled away. They thought they were cursed. In reality, they were being poisoned by their daily bread. And let's not forget fleas. Tiny, almost invisible, but they carried the most feared killer of all, plague. The Black Death wasn't a single moment in history. It was a recurring nightmare. Waves of it crashed across Europe, each more merciless than the last. Between 1347 and 1351, it killed up to 60% of Europe's population. In some towns, no one was left alive to bury the dead. Bodies piled up in homes, streets, and churches. Children died alone. Parents dug mass graves. Whole villages vanished. You'd think after something like that, people would change how they lived. But no, because they didn't understand it. They blamed it on the stars, on God's wrath,
On minorities, on strangers, on witches.
anyone but the real cause. That ignorance cost millions of lives. Even in peace, your body betrayed you. Your teeth rotted fast, no sugar needed. The coarse, unrefined bread you ate ground your molars down like sandpaper. By 20, most people had mouths full of pain. Abscesses went untreated. Infections spread. You might die from a toothache. Women fared no better. In fact, they fared worse. Childbirth was the leading cause of death for women. With no antiseptics and no understanding of hygiene, every birth was a gamble. And if you gave birth to a daughter, you might mourn instead of celebrate, knowing she'd likely face the same dangers. Then there's the weather. Not just uncomfortable, deadly. The Little Ice Age began in the 14th century. Crops failed. Storms raged. Cold snapped through even the thickest wool. People froze to death in their homes. Without insulation or central heating, you had a fire if you could afford wood. Otherwise, you huddled together for warmth, breath fogging in the air, praying for spring. And amidst it all, there's the silence of knowledge not yet discovered. You don't know why the stars move or what the moon really is. You don't know why illness spreads or how to make it stop. You have only faith, stories, and fear. Every shadow might be a demon. Every fever might be a punishment. Your world is framed by mystery, and not the enchanting kind. Books are rare. Most people never learn to read. The Bible is in Latin, and Latin is for the priests. Knowledge is hoarded, not shared. Questions are dangerous. Curiosity can get you labeled a heretic. So you stop wondering. You accept. You survive by not knowing. And yet, somehow, people did more than survive. They made music. They told stories. They carved meaning out of misery. A lullaby sung over a cradle. A crude carving on a church pew. A whispered joke at the market. Signs of life, of resistance, of humanity refusing to vanish. But make no mistake, this wasn't romantic suffering. This was unrelenting, aching generational pain. A world in which your biggest dreams were to live past 30, bury your children in consecrated ground, and die with a priest nearby to mumble a few words over your soul. And through it all, the toil, the sickness, the dark, you still have to wake up tomorrow and do it again. Ready for part 5? Part 5, the longest night. So you've survived this long. Against all odds, you're still breathing. But in the Middle Ages, survival isn't living, it's enduring. And even that takes everything you have. Let's say you've made it into your 30s. Congratulations. You've outlived most of your generation. You've buried friends, siblings, children. You've dodged plagues, famine, fire, and perhaps even war. But what kind of life is this? Really? Your body is broken. Your hands are knotted with arthritis. Your back curves not from age, but from years of relentless labor. You've never known a day without pain. And yet, you still rise before dawn, because survival doesn't care about your aching bones. You still walk miles for water. You still kneel in frozen fields to plant crops that may or may not survive the next frost. You still go to bed hungry, teeth clenched against the emptiness. Your nights are haunted by the memory of screams, the silence after loss, the prayers you've whispered for too long. Society doesn't give you a break for age. There's no retirement.
No pensions.
You work until you drop. And when you do, someone else takes your place, your child if they're still alive or someone else's. The wheel turns and you're forgotten. Even if you're one of the lucky few, landed, literate, protected, life isn't easy. You fear rebellion. You fear famine. You fear disease. You fear God more than death. You keep your power by marrying your children off like pieces on a chessboard, by keeping peasants in line, by whispering politics in the dark corridors of drafty halls. You sleep on feather beds, but not in peace. Let's not forget war. It's not noble. It's not heroic. It's brutal, chaotic, and horrifying. Battles aren't clean affairs. They're mud, screams, torn flesh, and blind rage. You don't die with glory. You die with your face in the dirt, your blood soaking into the same soil your ancestors once plowed. And if you survive, you come home to find your village razed, your family gone, your home nothing but cinders. You may think, surely there was something to look forward to? Some joy? Yes, but only in the smallest, fleeting moments. The warmth of a fire shared with others. The rare feast after harvest. The laughter of a child who doesn't yet know the world. The sound of a song hummed beneath your breath as you work. These were the treasures. They didn't make the suffering worth it, but they made it bearable. As the years grind on, you feel time not in birthdays, but in seasons. The smell of turned earth in spring. The buzzing flies of summer. The snap of branches in fall. The aching cold of winter. That's how you count your life. Not in candles on a cake, but in how many harvests you've survived. Death isn't a stranger. It's a presence always nearby. You expect it. You prepare for it. You fear it, but you also welcome it when your strength begins to fail. A clean death is a blessing. To die in your sleep, with someone holding your hand. That's the best you can hope for. The local priest comes. You confess, receive the sacraments. Your sins are many. You've lied. You've stolen. You've blasphemed. But you've also suffered. Maybe that counts for something. Maybe God sees the calluses on your hands, the scars on your soul. You close your eyes. The candle flickers beside you. You hear your name whispered in prayer. The breath leaves your lungs, and the night takes you. Your life was small by modern standards. You never traveled. You never saw the ocean. You never read a book of your own. But your existence mattered. You were one link in the long, rusted chain that pulled the world forward. Slowly, painfully, but forward all the same. And now, centuries later, someone lies in bed, listening to your story. Warm, federal safe. And perhaps, just perhaps, they understand a little more clearly why they wouldn't last a day in your shoes. Sleep well, traveler. The Middle Ages are finally behind you.